The Rainy Day by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. An analysis. The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains and the wind is never weary. The vine still clings to the moldering wall, but at every gust the dead leaves fall, and the day is dark and dreary. In the first stanza of The Rainy Day, the author speaks of the day as cold, dark, and dreary. He is describing the weather as non-stop. There is no light or warmth to improve the mood of the day. The wind is never weary. This is an interesting use of personification, which through negation or by telling the opposite, he is actually describing the wind as resilient and strong. There is a slightly more hopeful image in the third line as he describes the vine that still clings to the moldering wall. While not happy, there is some strength in nature. It is something that has not been destroyed by the elements. The clinging of the vine feels desperate and necessary, as if this is all it knows and the only way it knows how to survive. Stanza 1 describes the narrator's experience of a bad day. It is raining and the wind never tires but keeps on blowing. My life is cold and dark and dreary. It rains and the wind is never weary. My thoughts still cling to the moldering past, but the hopes of youth fall thick in the blast, and the days are dark and dreary. In this stanza, he uses almost the same words that he used in the first stanza, but instead of the word day, he now uses the word life. He now talks about his life, and he describes it as cold, dark, and dreary. And there is also rain and wind that is strong and non-stop. He also talks about his thoughts. Let's look at the third and fourth stanza. They cling to the moldering past, and his hopes fall thick in the blast. This is a mental perception of his life. There is some force, some kind of depression that is overcoming him as a cold, dark storm takes over his thoughts and he cannot still move on from the past. In stanza 2, the narrator tells us his whole life is gloomy. He still thinks of what he did in the past, but has given up the dreams that he had when he was younger. Be still, sad heart, and cease repining. Behind the clouds is the sun still shining. Thy fate is the common fate of all. Into each life some rain must fall. Some days must be dark and dreary. In the third stanza of The Rainy Day, the speaker changes up the pattern that was evident in the first two stanzas. He uses a technique known as an apostrophe, or which is a figure of speech or figurative language that calls to someone that is dead or not around or to an inanimate object. In this stanza, he calls or he talks to his heart. He says to his heart, "Be still and cease repining," or stop mourning and stop missing the past. Despite what's going on around him, this period of depression, he knows that there is still sun shining behind the clouds. It is inevitable that there are darker moments to life. These are just part of living. His heart must learn, he asserts, that some days are going to be dark and dreary, so that others may be warm and rewarding. Stanza 1 describes the narrator's experience of a bad day. It is raining and the wind never tires but keeps on blowing. In stanza 2, the narrator tells us his whole life is gloomy. He still thinks of what he did in the past but has given up the dreams that he had when he was younger. He feels hope in stanza 3. He realizes that everybody goes through a rough patch in their life and now waits for it to be over. This is a story written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in 1842. He wrote it in a memory of his wife who had passed away in front of his eyes. This 1842 poem has a famous line, "Into each life some rain must fall," meaning everyone will experience difficulty and heartache at some point. The day is a metaphor for life. This poem teaches us that it is natural that someday we have to experience heartache, pain, challenges, and struggles. But we must never forget that it is just some days. We must remember that those days will be brighter because behind the clouds and rain there is a sun that will shine upon us.